I want to go to Baker Mayfield. I thought you had an interesting. Somebody once in the last year asked Baker Mayfield about me and blah blah blah, and he said, "Well, we're frenemies." And I think Baker knows I like him and respect him, and he's always been nice to me. He said nice things publicly. You had a take the other day that he was over discussed when he was in Cleveland. He's now under discussed.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think Baker's better than Dak. He's better than Tua. He's better than Geno. He's better than Aaron. He's better than Russell. He's better than Cousins. I think he and Darnold are very similar, that they can be mistake prone, but they can plan it, and they're
Threw
real
40
players.
touchdowns last year. He's
Yeah.
been
No,
really
but
good. Go ahead.
yeah, no, Baker is a prime example. You see this a lot in the NBA, where a guy comes in and he just needs to mature, Ant Edwards. In the NFL, generally, maturity is not the issue. It's you either have it or you don't. Baker was the rare, a lot of testosterone, a lot of confidence. And I felt like, can somebody turn the governor down just a little?
Sure.
He was Johnny Manziel, but more likable and with actual talent. He could really throw a football. But I think Baker is the rare NFL player and quarterback. You're like, one of the talents, inarguable. He's just got to turn the governor down. Cleveland was not built for Baker. You go to a great GM, a talented roster in Tampa, which is, by the way, below the radar. It's in the NFC South, which is a low-profile division. Baker now is absolutely under discussed. He is a really good NFL quarterback. I don't think that's disputable.
Yeah, I think it's hard to make a top 10 and not include him. And then when you add to the fact that he makes around 60% of what the other guys in that top 10 make, his value is massive. For a guy who dealt with injuries in his time in Cleveland, he's incredibly durable. His teammates love him, and he now has back-to-back years of really high productivity. A playoff quarterback, win the division, again, 40 touchdowns last year. I think that because he was talked about so much when he wasn't yet that good, I think people got, I don't know if numb's the right word, but they were just kind of got over him. And now that he is, I think, really good, people are just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's Baker. Like, people, I think, boxed him in, he's a good story. And that is true. But he's more than that at this point. At this point, like, this is, a third rail for some. Do I think he's better than Brock Purdy? I do. Would I rather have, and so you said Dak Prescott. I think that's close. I think that there are a lot of quarterbacks that, like, I'll give you a great example. Now, this guy's young and we'll see, but he makes a lot of money. I think he's pretty clearly better than Jordan Love. And I think that Jordan Love is discussed like he is, you know what I mean? This ascending guy.
It's interesting. So I was really not anti-Jordan Love, but I said for 2 years, there is more footage of Bigfoot than Jordan Love. They're hiding him for a reason. Yeah. Then he came out and he was kind of sensational, and I really bought into him. And then it's as if the league defensive coordinators got all this footage and they found holes. And at the end of last year, you're like, oh, people have caught on to him. This is, now it would be a sophomore slump for anybody else, but he was like in his fourth year.
Fifth year, yeah.
And so I want to see him. So now it's like an NBA playoff series. Like, you get worked, then you change things, and then there's stages and coaching, adaptations to a playoff series.
Yep.
Yeah. So now I've seen Jordan shock the league. Now I've seen people react and he struggles. Now I want to see his next hand with Matt LaFleur. That's why they drafted, to me, a receiver in the first round, because they're like, listen, he may need a little more help than we think here. So I'm not sure Baker's better. I think Jordan's got a hell of a whip and he's a really good athlete, but he's one of the last quarterbacks in this league, Jordan Love. I'm not sure. I know who's bad. I know who's good. I know who's pretty good. Jordan Love is the last. I'm not really sure what he is in the league to me.
I'm going to throw another guy that I think this guy's really good, but I'm going to put the not sure, and that's CJ. I think CJ's really good.
So do I.
I think it is hard in the modern NFL to be really good if you hate running. You don't, you know what I mean? And now,
Right.
like, I'm sure CJ, especially because he's black quarterback, like, was probably, felt pressure, like, to prove to everyone, like, I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not a running back with that also playing the position. I'm a true prototypical pocket passer. The problem with that is that position, it's not extinct, but it is on the Matt Stafford, Jared Goff, Joe Burrow style it's just a hard way to make a living. And it doesn't mean you have to be, one read and then take off and run, but it's a nice pitch to have, particularly come the playoffs.
Well,
and I thought CJ in the playoffs last year actually went to it a little more, and so that was a good sign. But I just want to see a little more from him. But yeah, I think in general, we usually know who these guys are. And then there are guys who, like, this is the thing that I would say about guys like Darnold or Geno. I don't think Darnold's a weird one for you because you always saw this really good player. But I think people that said, like, those guys were not good potentially were correct. And then those guys, through hard work and maturation and learning and getting older, got good. Like, and so, like, I think that a guy like Geno, I think Geno was probably rightfully a, lower tier backup early and then worked his ass off, got better, learned more, and became this player. But yeah, I think most of the quarterbacks we know about who they are. The one I'll throw another one at you that to me is the most confusing or most intriguing, and that's Herbert. Because Herbert, there is no question how talented he is. But 5 years into your career, you need more than just he throws an amazing ball, and there's not a lot of quarterbacks who 5 years into their career, who ended up being amazing, who 5 years into their career hadn't accomplished anything, and he's on that list.
Yeah, no, his first two head coaches, though, Dean Spanos until Harbaugh, never paid money for a coach. So his first two coaches were a miss. So I do think he's a rare, circumstantially, I think he's a rare. I think the people in the league that I know all love him. He was also, and the Justin Herbert criticism is fair. He was mechanical. On film, people thought he was mechanical. Tom Telesco, who drafted him, said, we thought he was mechanical. Then I went and watched him in person, and I saw him play the best Wisconsin defense of all time, and went, oh, okay, he's not that mechanical. But he can be sort of a rhythm quarterback where when he gets out of rhythm, I've said this about certain players are like the Pacers are a rhythm offense. Halliburton leaves for 4.5 minutes. They can't get the rhythm back. Like, it's like, oh, it just doesn't work. Like, Herbert's a rhythm thrower. Like, he gets into a rhythm. And if you bang him or he gets sacked or a receiver drops it, he can get out of rhythm. A lot of quarterbacks aren't. They just pick it up, they go. So I think the criticism of Herbert are fair, but he's 6'5", a 4.2 biology major with a huge arm.
He's super smart. He's super athletic. He could run more. He did a little more under Harbaugh. Like, he in college, he ran the hell out of the ball when they needed to. Here would be kind of a concern I have that is really just a kernel of a belief I have about sports, which is particularly for the most scrutinized positions. So, best player on an NBA team, quarterback on a football team. The randomness of your first couple times in a big spot casts the longest shadow imaginable over your career. And so, I'll use a basketball example, then a couple football examples. The fact that Kobe, as a teenager, basically, was a champion, and that, listen, Kobe was unbelievable on the second two championships with Shaq, but that first championship with Shaq, he was a role player, and it was peak Shaquille O'Neal. But before he is old enough to drink, he's a champion. no one is ever going to be able to be like, can you win a ring with Kobe Bryant?
Right.
And that gave him, in my opinion, the freedom to be like, I'll take every fucking end of game shot. No one can ever say anything bad about me, right? And so it had a real impact. I think Tom Brady is one of the greatest athletes of all time, and obviously has the greatest resume of any quarterback ever. I also wonder if they simply hadn't, I won't even do the tuck rule game. If in that first Super Bowl, Vinatieri had
misses the free throws,
misses the field goal, or he makes one bad read or whatever it is, and they don't win there, then does he have like the freedom to be him in those moments moving forward? I think there is a chance that we are talking about Russell Wilson the way we talk about Terry Bradshaw if he doesn't throw the Malcolm Butler pick. Because I think if they would have won that Super Bowl and he really believed, like, I'm ordained by God to do this, that it then led to itself. And then go ahead.
Well, no. And by losing that Super Bowl and throwing that pick, it eroded the chemistry in the locker room, and it was never the same off one play.
And I think it eroded for him this feeling of this is meant to be. The flip side to Brady or to Kobe example is Peyton. So Peyton, early in his career, came up short in a couple big spots, and then the weight got bigger and bigger, and he got that moniker. Even though he's as talented as any football player I've ever seen. So the reason I bring that up is I worry that for Herbert, he is going to walk into his next playoff game with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Yeah. He's going to be like, I've been here. I basically played 2 real and 1 de facto playoff game. The de facto was the Week 18 Chargers-Raiders. Remember that? Where like a tie, you both go to the playoffs, and the Raiders steal it at the end. We blew a 4-score lead to the Jags, and I threw 4 picks in my other playoff game. And it's so fleeting what that, what those can be. And so that is to me like a real, and something I'm excited to see moving, because you've seen how it's worn on Lamar, and you see the freedom Mahomes plays with. Mahomes like, nobody can ever call me anything but clutch, and he can play like that.
Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. Well, Lamar now is feeling the pressure. You can see Lamar in playoff games is tight. I think eventually the failures of the Chargers and the Spanos family to get the right coach got them to pay $15 million a year for Harbaugh, so he has his kingmaker. And I also think this is something that people don't really understand this. I think men, at least in America, tend to worship other men. And we just forget that Michael Jordan for years didn't do shit without Pippen, and at the end it was pathetic in Washington. But it's 6 for 6, and he's the greatest ever, and he failed at baseball. And Michael got Phil Jackson and Scottie Pippen, and everything changed. He was just kind of a ball hog who couldn't get past Boston. He couldn't get past Detroit. It didn't get along with a lot of teammates early in Chicago or late in Washington. And even when he was with the Bulls, he was hard in the documentary. Tom Cruise is a great example. So Tom Cruise goes in a high school play, and a year later, he's in the movies. And not long after that, he's in a risky business. And that really defines him. I mean, Ray-Ban sales exploded, from the underwear scene in risky business. So Tom had absolute talent. But if you go back and look at Tom Cruise, who is as driven, willful, and obsessed about movies as anybody, it wasn't until his last 5 to 6 movies where he finally came to terms with, I'm just going to run a lot and do action movies, and they all hit. And his last 5 to 6 movies have been massive hits. He did Rock of Ages, Eyes Wide Shut, Vanilla Sky, who some people really like. I've never seen it. He had lots of misses. Marlon Brando had lots of misses. So think how long it took for finally a Bradley Cooper to find the right director, or Tom Cruise to find the right vehicle. He was always talented, but like Herbert, he needs his Harbaugh. And that's what I think we tend to forget, is that Michael Jordan had Doug Collins and Stan Ulbrich, but no Scottie Pippen. He couldn't win a playoff series.
Correct.
None of them. So you just need so much help. And that's, when anybody will ever ask me, about, oh gosh, how do you think you've done it for 30 years and you've been doing this? And I say, I've had great help. I've had really good bosses. I've had a couple stinkers, but overwhelmingly, I've had really good support and really good agents and really good bosses. I would have been somewhat successful. But the point being is, if you find a great stockbroker or Obama, he has somewhere, he's got a kingmaker behind him. Somebody behind him believed in him. And we just forget that in sports. And that Mahomes would have been successful, but Brett Veach and Andy Reid are a big part
of it. And that it's also one of the reasons that I find I find it really fun, but also frustrating at times when we trying to parse individual credit for team sport success is one of the most fun things about our business, and it's also why a guy you and I see similarly, but is, one of the more polarizing, if you will, quarterbacks, is so interesting in Purdy. Because it's so much of, all right, are we, like I argue with Wilds about it. Wilds basically, his take is that I believe when the Niners win, Shanahan won, and when they lose, Purdy lost. That the Shanahan gets the credit and doesn't get the blame. And my actual take is that I think that there are a lot of factors that have gone into why a quarterback who everyone in the league, including the Niners, thought was not that good, has had, statistically, one of the 3 or 4 greatest starts to a career in the history of the sport. I understand there are misses. I get it. I know Brady went 199. I understand all that. But when people with Purdy, people will say, you would feel differently if he were the number 1 pick. And my answer is yes, of course.
Of course, he'd be a better player.
Right. Because that's
look at
you wouldn't the draft, it's not random. Like, if he were the number 1 pick, he wouldn't be undersized. He would have a slightly stronger arm.
That's right.
He would, there's real things to it.
Tony Romo was undrafted when Bill Parcells found him. So the first 4 to 5 years of Tony Romo's roster was great. They didn't pay him anything. He was free. Right. Yeah. The minute they started paying Tony Romo, the offensive line wasn't as good, and Tony Romo couldn't win big games, even though Tony Romo is a really good B+, A- quarterback. But Tony Romo was free. Kurt Warner early in his career, who I think is great, undervalued historically, came into the league, he was free. There's no question that Brock Purdy's lineup was stacked.
And listen, we've done the Purdy thing before. What is so frustrating to me about the Purdy thing is, and maybe this is why it's an argument I can't get over, is, and I'm going to make this point, till the end of my career, as long as this is relevant. For years, folks argued about Jimmy Garoppolo. Is he just a winner? Is he underrated? Did he make Brady nervous because he was breathing down his neck? And then there were folks like me who was like, I actually think he's pretty mediocre. And they'd be like, no, that team was terrible. And then he got there. They went to an NFC Championship game. They went to a Super Bowl. And I kept saying, I really think 25 quarterbacks in the league, if you gave them the defense the Niners had then, that head coach, those weapons, they would be incredibly successful. And it's like, well, that's a hypothetical. We'll never know. And then they literally replaced him with the last pick of the draft. Had the exact same level of success And those same people, instead of being like, shit, maybe you're right, they're like, that new guy, he's fucking awesome too. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, they literally did it. They didn't replace him with a first-round pick. They replaced him with the last pick of the draft. And guess what they did? They went to an NFC Championship game like they did with Jimmy. They then went to a Super Bowl like they did with Jimmy. They lost the Super Bowl to literally the same team in very similar fashion. And you're like, turns out they're both awesome. And then I'm like, hey, by the way, how's Garoppolo look now that he's gone?
Can't play.
They're like, oh, well, injuries, I guess. I'm like, or maybe he's stuck. Like, I think Purdy's obviously better than Garoppolo. But, like, Garoppolo is a below-average quarterback who looked quite good. I think Purdy's an average quarterback who looks great in the exact same system. And, by the way, Jimmy Garoppolo never had Christian McCaffrey. And I just feel myself going crazy on it. And then they paid him $53 million. So what do I know?